This beautiful piece of fire service history is a 1941 Pirsch with a 750 gallon per minute Hale pump. It was originally powered with a Waukesha 6-cylinder gas engine with a 4-speed transmission. It has since been converted to a Chevy 350 with an automatic. It was delivered to the Bakersfield Army Air Corps on December 2, 1941. From there it went to Crescent City, California as a civil defense engine. Pirsch was one of the leading builders of aerial ladders in the 1930s. In 1931, Pirsch introduced the very first aerial ladder with a hydromechanical hoist. In 1932, Pirsch introduced its junior aerial ladder. This inexpensive design allowed many fire departments to be able to afford their very first aerial ladder truck. In 1936, Pirsch delivered the first fully powered 100-foot all-metal aerial ladder. Pirsch was one of the leading builders of fire apparatus after World War II, but unfortunately ceased production in 1986 after they filed for bankruptcy. Come right along with us in this military fire engine through the city of Reno to go get ice cream. Hi everybody, Jessica Quinalty. Welcome back to another episode of Firefighters and Fire Trucks Getting Ice Cream. We're out here at Fire Shows West in Reno. I'm driving a 1941 Pirsch that was actually assigned to the U.S. Army. It was delivered 5 days to the Bakersfield facility right before Port Harbor. I'm heading over to pick up Phil Ambrose from Haz-Mat Nation and Haz-Sim to talk about all things Haz-Mat and Haz-Mat nerd stuff. So stay tuned. There we go. How's that? What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, Jesse, great.
This cold
Good to see you. This is awesome. Wow.
I tell you, I get to drive around some pretty cool rigs for the show,
Yeah.
but this is a first.
This is, wow.
So this is a 1941 Pirsch, and it was delivered 5 days before Pearl Harbor started. So
December 2nd, 1941.
yeah, a plate on it.
Wow.
I mean, it's incredible. So yeah, really excited. Kind of cruise around, go get some ice cream.
Sounds great.
Talk Haz-Mat. I mean, I don't really want to talk about Haz-Mat, but we'll talk about Haz-Mat
We'll
for a
talk
while.
about, yeah.
We'll change the
Let's
subject.
not make this too exciting. Let's just stick to.
We're still going to get ice cream. No
Okay,
matter
yeah,
what.
that part. That's what you told me we were going to do. So
Yeah, you know, like, look, if I have to talk about Haz-Mat to get ice cream and a ride in a fire engine, I will talk about whatever you want.
we'll find something good to talk about, Haz-Mat. This purrs like a kitten, too.
It does, dude. It's actually like the gas gets up and goes real quick.
Yeah, he knows how to
Say when you're holding on. You ready?
build it.
Good. Okay, here we
Safety
go.
first.
That's right. All right.
I don't even have an oh crap handle, huh?
No, there's nothing in this thing. I don't think safety-wise we're supposed to talk about it, but all the people in the Everyone Goes Home program that I teach about and everything else would be like, you're going against everything you teach right now. Just to go out and get ice cream with Phil? Come on.
But considering what this was originally built for,
yeah, for sure.
Wow, what a beautiful day in Reno.
So, we're interviewing. This is not a 3-person fucking show, Bill.
I got to interview. I got to interview George.
Apparently, I forgot to tell him what we're doing here.
Yeah,
yeah. That'll go in the cut later, edit later on.
I got to interview George Kapler at FDIC a few years ago. It was perfect, except for my cameraman kept going, oh, really? Oh.
Classic.
I could not edit it out. It sounded like.
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right, so we're out of Fire Shows West again. We got to teach here last year together, so that was Kind of cool. What class are you doing? The same
I'm doing my hazmat. We call it, or I call it the. Let me start that over. I'm doing my hazmat gray area. Really a first in considerations class for anyone, for the engine companies. It's designed around how to properly set up the incident before the hazmat team gets there. But the big part is the hazmat team's not going to get there, because what we're talking about is rescue when there could be a hazmat. And what I take is that old school rule of thumb, and I throw that out the window. So it can be controversial, but we go through all your first in operations, how to safely set up, yet still consider if you had to have a rescue. Because it's we didn't sign up for this to write people off that early, and I go through case studies and really proof that shows there's a whole lot you can do.
And that by waiting for the hazmat team for 45 minutes.
Yeah, there's a whole lot you can do. And even if you choose not to initiate a rescue, there's a whole lot you can do to up the percentages of saving that life. And that's really what the course is all about. So
even some of those where it is kind of like some bad, hazmat, methyl, whatever. If they're moving around, crawling, coughing, hacking, whatever, get that gross decon set up and get on the PA and go, crawl to me and I can save you.
Well, Jesse, we could be rolling down the road right now to a car fire, and it'll be puking out more carcinogens, more hazards, more IDLH than some of these instances or incidents that we get real nervous of. And my feeling is that we're nervous of them because we don't go on them every day. When have you heard somebody on a house fire say, oh no, I might be exposed to something? When you talk hazmat, yes, I get it, because we're, hazmat guys are typically pretty cool, and it's a sexy gig. But
you are sexy, but it's not the hazmat.
But the reality is, if you're going in and you're doing any sort of fire suppression, you're already dealing with hazmat. So that's what I try to do in the class, is draw those relationships, help other people end up making their own decision. But like I said, there's quite a bit you can still do. It's no different than if we were out in this, beautiful 1941 military grade fire engine. If we saw an incident, we might roll that way.
I got to figure out how to pump.
We have no gear. We have no qualified engineer to pump this thing. But with our knowledge, we could still show up and at least evacuate, deny entry. Potentially, maybe one of us could maybe help the flow path of that fire. Potentially, we could at least give some good intel to the incoming units, and that's all without getting into the danger zone. So, in that scenario right there, as we ride around in this thing, we could actually, initiate something that's going to help those people. So in the same scenario, in what I go through in my class, is instances where just a little bit of action rather than the inaction. And when I kind of take apart the rule of thumb, there's a place for the rule of thumb, right? It was that Bhopal, India incident that, man, you wanted to get as far away of that incident as possible. There was no chance of survivability, but we can't do that in our job with most of the incidents we go to. So in the class, I go through case studies. Another example would be something we go over is hibachi suicide.
Okay.
So, you and I remember hibachis. For some of the newer kids, that would just be a charcoal grill. Well, it's not uncommon to commit suicide by lighting off the charcoal grill, putting it in an area of the house, usually the bathroom or in a bathtub, so it won't. Their intent is not to create a structure fire. Their intent is to create a CO environment that will potentially kill them and the rest of their family in these instances. Well, in that scenario, if you and I were rolling up in our frontline apparatus, for a smoke in a structure, we're not going to think twice about going in, kicking in the door, stretching a line, putting out the fire. But my concern is once somebody says, hey, this is potentially a hazmat, because we heard he was setting some briquettes on a grill, we take a couple steps, and of course we should be concerned. When anybody wants to take their life, we should be concerned. And I go through what's called bullets, bombs, or blunt force trauma, which is if there's any possibility that this is something that, yes, they're going to try to hurt first responders, we got to change our tactics.
Right.
But we do that on structure fires now too. You show up and somebody with a handgun standing at your hydrant, you're going to change your operation.
Yeah.
But you show up and somebody says, hey, I think he said he was going to set his hibachi and gas out the family. To me, that still says kick in the door with your proper PPE and go save them. Or at least initiate some ventilation, because as we know, in a circumstance like that, it's the enclosed space that's going to cause that ideal H atmosphere for the civilians. So another area we go through in the class is your PPE. I don't talk about hazmat PPE. I mean the level A suit, big plastic suit. When I look at that thing, I'm looking at a person in a plastic suit saying, this is a hazmat incident that, for one, is the person putting on that suit is likely 30 minutes to an hour past the initial call time. I'm looking at that's specific to hazards that have the ability to go to breach anything else we have. So I'll go over what our firefighter turnouts and a properly donned SCBA will protect you from, and honestly protects you from most things. So yeah, that's what the class is about. So I try to make it very relevant. All the studies, what I've done is take recent and probably backup. I've been doing this now for 10 years, so I have a few historical incidents. Most of them, and I think I'm up to about 52, where instead of riding around getting ice cream, I've contacted the first responders that went to those calls, right, as simple as it was, and I asked them simple questions. I asked them, were you prepared? Did you have a plan? What do you think about the PPE you had, and what would you do differently? And on so many from the chemical suicides, a lot of these things start out as a miscellaneous medical. They start out as a smoke in a structure. Right. They start out as a simple EMS run. So I really drive home having a plan. Hey, there's firefighters across this city right now that probably just finished their morning lineup, and they talked about their truck company ops and ventilation. They talked about cutting square holes instead of round holes. They talked about stretching the line and the different type of lays they're going to do. But did any one of them talk about, hey, if we had an EMS run and we're rolling up carrying all our Pelican cases and things went sideways, how are we going to react? We do that on brush fires. We escape based on reverse tool order, right? It's very common for us. So if you and I walked in right now on just a routine medical run and we find somebody that's got an exit bag over their head because they were trying to end their life using, say, a helium canister, what is our plan? Are we going to initiate something? Are we going to go back to the rig and don an SCBA? Who are we calling? It's those type of things that I just want people to be more aware of, because right, when EMS, as much as we love that, as much as hazmat, right? When EMS it is truly the biggest part of our day, and it's not just based on the volume of calls. Even fires have some sort of EMS component. We should be looking at those calls too, and really we need to be looking at all those calls out of respect for those that had tragic consequences during those situations.
Well, you talk about like going in and like turnouts in an SCBA, and it's always one of those things that I look at is the ERG basically puts our turnout gear in the same thing as a uniform in a class. It's like, how is that the same level of PPE?
And of course they have to preach, and this class is meant, it's an eye-opener on several levels. My goal is that people, it does make them think, and it does make them even question me. I'm good with that. But go back to their department and say, you know what, if anything, I'm going to discuss this particular. I use some props in the class that are directly related to some significant events. Generally, unless somebody's had my class before, they've never even heard of these events. They don't necessarily make the news, right, but they they were that career incident for the personnel that ran that call.
Yeah.
Well,
and so we did tabletop command hazmat module yesterday morning before you end up coming into town. And I'm not a hazmat tech. I'm a fro, right? And then I brought one of my other instructors, Travis, that's a tech spec. And I'm looking at it from the command perspective, and that's what you got to remember is most of your incident commanders, your first in company officer, your battalion chief, they're literally fro level. So all they know is that rule of thumb. So when we did the tabletop simulator, the very first scenario we did was the CO2 at McDonald's. One of those common ones.
There's no better documented. Phoenix Fire did such an outstanding job on that. And then I don't specifically use that one anymore because there's been so many others.
Right.
But hats off to Phoenix Fire for doing such a great job in documenting it. And that's a great example. I mean, not only is the incident commander, maybe they're hazmat, maybe they're not, but still when I show up as an IC, I have to remember I'm not showing up as the hazmat specialist. I'm showing up to size up and organize that incident, as well as look at risk versus gain. But if I haven't really thought through the scenario, my comfort zone, and we're throwing out their rule of thumb, but the comfort zone might be, hey, do nothing. Well, that's okay, as long as you've exhausted all other. We do that all the time, choosing to go defensive,
right?
Choosing to pulling everybody out of a structure, especially before that collapse, like you're supposed to do, right? It's a big call. There's a company, on your Charlie side saying, no, we still want to fight this thing. So risk versus gain for the IC, and then you throw in that hazmat component, where really to me it's just something we don't do every day. If it's a car fire, if it's a single family house, we do that every day.
Well, and most of those hazmats, it's not like they come in as go to a hazmat call. It's a medical aid, it's a
person sleeping,
accident.
person down.
Right. And that's what we're trying to do on the table, is like all those ones that we kind of start off with is like, yeah, you're not expecting it to be a hazmat. You become an exposure a lot of times in those early phases.
Oh, yeah, and well, I can't say enough. I've got to always plug Firefighter Cancer Support Network. And anybody that says, hey, I don't do hazmat, would be similar to if we said we don't do EMS. Yes, we do EMS. That's right. What our job is. Yes, you do hazmat, even if you're at a fro level, because guess what? You're getting dirty. You're getting in there.
Yeah.
And so decon, gross decon. Wow, this is pretty.
Yeah, the river over here.
This is the Truckee, right?
Yeah.
Oh, how pretty.
River.
What beautiful. Man, Reno's looking great. That gross decon, that's something we should be practicing all the time anyhow.
Right.
On fires. Just make it, we have no problem putting together our medical group, which is important, our RIC team, rehab. Well, I would put gross decon up there above rehab or in conjunction with it, because how many times have we ate, stale strike team food that was left over from last year's deployment,
right,
where the Red Cross brought us some crackers, from around the time this rig was put into service. Yet we're doing it with grubby hands, grubby faces. So
right,
you'll probably have to cut this one out. But I always say you don't hire a plumber to come work on your house. So you're on shift and the family's at home and you've got a major incident. You don't pick your plumber based on how much crap he has all over his clothes. You would say that guy is not doing a good job. So it was nice to see in the fire service over the last few years how we've taken a little bit more pride in keeping our gear clean, because just like when you step off the rig and you end up stepping in some sort of excrement, and you're going to do the hop and you're going to pull the booster line, you're going to clean your boot. We should think that same way with half of the toxins we enter that aren't your hazmat call.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that that's been at the forefront, and I think organizations like the Firefighter Cancer Support Network have really been driving that. And it's really simple. It's just clean up after yourself. It doesn't have to be a struggle.
So you're the hazmat guy, and so on the table here here's some of the simulations that we do, and let's get your feedback. So, like I said, we started off with the McDonald's, CPR in progress in the bathroom, and my McDonald's, we think like somebody in the bathroom, it's an overdose. So it's very easy to get lulled into that, right? Yeah. And then eventually, the one of the employees starts feeling sick. Whether it's the McNuggets or the McRib or whatever, and then eventually, like, they still don't figure it out. It's a hazmat a lot of times. Even with an employee getting sick, and then all of a sudden your engineer's like, yeah, I'm starting to get nauseous and lightheaded, and then that's when it like kind of clicks in, But amazingly enough, your crew was exposed, and they're still like having the firefighter like follow up to the hospital with the CPR in progress. Like, he was just inside there for and so we do that scenario. Right?
That's a good one. And one of the ones, and I've got a bunch, so I usually have to pick in the class which ones will suit, say, the vibe of the room. But there was one I was privy to. I get to travel the country quite a bit, and
this is the one-way street, and they're going the wrong way on the one-way street.
That's beautiful. So we were worried we would go the wrong way. You just did a full city block. Congratulations. It's not uncommon with those CO2, especially with your fast food establishments where you have the canisters below grade. But there's a great one, and it never made the news, so it might be of folklore, but it was believable enough to me. But a friend of mine that used to work at a large East Coast department, and it was a bar,
right?
And I could tell you what a bar is. There's usually like it's kind of a long table. There's somebody that stands behind it, and they're serving these beverages for the people in front.
They slide drinks down the bar.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never been to a bar before, so I don't know.
People are getting sleepy at the bar. Oh, shocker! That's like, for me, that's midnight mass, and I'm getting sleepy. And I remember that as a kid. And you're sucking down CO2 from because they don't want to. They've got all the windows closed. Well, they're getting sleepy at this bar. And then they called on one individual because they thought it was a medical emergency, but it was a CO2 leak, and it was not really discovered until later.
Right.
The individual did not die. It was the primary. How we always ask. Did they faint before they fell, or did they trip and fall? Right. Your size up for ALS versus BLS when you're a California medic. In that case, the CO2 leak, they discovered it. It was never really a hazmat call. It kind of came later, but okay.
Yeah.
What do you think made that situation better from the get-go? They opened all the doors. We come in as the fire department. If it's a noisy establishment, we might need to say, hey, step outside. We're going into fresh air. Or we might have to say, hey, DJ, turn down the tunes and let's leave the door open, and we need some lights because my medics need to work. So all those actions they just took on that call that was initiated as a kind of a syncopal, all that did was ventilate. And then it was later discovered, oh yeah, we had a CO2 leak. We thought everybody was just having a rough night. So
yeah, and it's easy to get into that lull too, So we do that scenario. And then we do a house that's tinted for fumigation with somebody reported down inside.
Big top hazmat. Right? I love those.
And we, amazingly enough, for some reason, the students in the class, they think it's like an employee of Bob's Bugs or whatever. It's like, they're not going to be the ones that it's a resident, it's a transient, somebody robbing the place. And I think all of us have watched Breaking Bad that, hey, maybe it's a meth lab in there.
Yeah.
So
that's a great one to discuss, especially because at least down in the area I'm from, now most of the SWAT, it became so commonplace. And Jesse, this is one of those things. I brought it up on the East Coast, and they don't do the circus thing.
Right.
You won't see a.
They don't do the.
You won't see a 15-story apartment building in Manhattan covered with the stripes. It's definitely regionally unique based on the bugs and how they treat them. But when it was happening quite a bit down in Southern California, it got to the point where cops, firefighters show up. Hey, whose handle? Well, there's bullets, bombs, and blunt force trauma involved, so I'm not sending my crew in. If it was, say, something nefarious, it was a house being robbed. I know we've gotten better now. Most SWAT teams have now, because that's actually a fairly simple hazmat. We put on the SCBA, which is you know, the industry folks would usually say that's overkill.
Right.
And I say that because if you work in the hazmat industry, the whole goal is to not wear the suit. If I've got employees, or I'm one of them, and I've been that employee that's got an 8-hour day, that's where all those numbers came from, your time-weighted average, because as the health and safety person for that company, and heck, even for the employee, the last thing I want to do, like I did years ago outside of Sacramento, slinging brown bottles, 1-gallon bottles, and turning them into a 55-gallon bottle. You want to minimize the amount you're in the suit. So in industry, they're all the time looking, hey, I could just use a regular PAPR for that. So going back to the big top hazmat, you've got the Vicane, which is incredibly toxic.
Right.
And what makes it worse, it's odorless, like your CO. Right. It's colorless. It doesn't put out a green cloud. So what they do when they tent things is they put in a chloropectin, and the chemists in the room don't have to check me, but basically like you're putting in pepper spray, right? You know, just dumbing it down. And that's actually what is designed to, if somebody went in there, they're going to get, you know, their eyes are going to get irritated. They're going to start, you know, producing a whole lot of snot.
Right.
In that case, the bad guys already know. The bad guys, they've gone down to Harbor Freight. They've dropped $6 and bought an 18-pack of PAPR respirators, and they're going in to do their thing. A scenario you could say is, hey, what if Jimmy's bicycle or tricycle was out in front? Well, the chloropectin is usually going to do its job. And I love going over those because then it's another example of get together with your tenting folks, go out and do a company school. Those things are designed to ventilate so quickly. Like if they had a problem, you can pop the Vicane gas out. Right. Because Vicane gas also, it needs to be contained. It wants to get out. So it's not going to sit around and linger anyhow. But what a great example. And I use a couple of those, but the ones I use are even a little more unique, just to go off script a little bit, and ones that have happened regionally. Right. Because one of the things I've started is years ago now, I think we're 10 years, is our Haz-Mat Nation, which is, we have an Instagram account and stuff, and that's mostly for pictures of teams getting out and training, but packed with web articles. What we try to find is the not just the incidents that maybe you didn't hear about in the news, that didn't get all the viral hits, but take it a step further, and when we can, contact the responders and get a little information. And as firefighters, we don't necessarily like to give all the details of calls that went bad, but you'd be surprised. I know I'm an open book when it comes to, sure, I could have done better on that one. This is what I would have done. Right. And the common theme is generally, I wish I practiced this. I would have had just a plan. Yeah. You know, whoever talks in the morning and says, hey, if we get a medical call that turns into a structure, you know, you two are going out to the rig and throwing on your gear. I'm doing the 360, and you know, we usually talk about it when we're rolling up to the loom up, but not what would we do on all the other ones. And I think that's important.
So how long you been doing Haz-Mat Nation now?
Haz-Mat Nation came along after kind of Haz-Sim as a way to get, say, the word out. Yeah. And take, you know, hazmat, which a lot of people are fairly averse to, and make it a little more relevant to people, or at least come at them from a different angle. But Haz-Sim, it's now, I think, 10 years since the idea happened. Wow. Seems like a long time. Yeah, 10 years, 2022.
Crazy. So how did you come up with Haz-Sim in the first place? And, you know, explain what it is, and then how you figured out how to do this.
So I was at one of the federal facilities going through, this was after 9/11, obviously, and I've done hazmat pre 9/11 and post 9/11, right? And for those of us that have been on both sides of that, with both the fire service and hazmat, things changed, right? We pre 9/11, it was we thought of terrorists, of course we did, but the terrorism focus, the WMD focus, really came about more so after 9/11 and a few events prior to that. So yeah, I was out at a one of the federal facilities where you could do live agent training for hazmat specialty, and I got to say it was a neat class. I ate some catfish, I drank a lot of beer, but the whole point of the class was to get you up close and personal with some pretty nasty stuff.
Right.
But what I didn't like is there's a handful of personnel from my department that even went to this thing. And the experience I had was really that pucker factor, that oh crap factor of, wow, this is real now. We better make sure we have our gear on. So I wanted to be able to replicate that and take it to everybody. Right. And I knew that hazmat wasn't always going to just stay with the hazmat team. Fire service was going to be tackling more and more of this because it's the world we live in. And yes, we do have a backer right now.
Well, I can see all the way
and
through the
and a
whole
backup
hose bed.
alarm.
You'd be surprised. I can see right through the entire hose bed all the way to the tailboard.
Dear Chief, how could this accident have been avoided? Good thing the chief from 1941 is probably not with us anymore. So.
Oh man. Well, I don't even know where we just left off. I'm trying to back.
We'll restart where you want. I'd say as a supervisor, that's a red flag.
Too long. How long now? That's the problem. We'll have to talk about that later.
Wheel chocks.